Hello everybody, and thank you Digital Health London for inviting me to run this session today. It's really delightful to come on after Jonathan because he made some really important points about the importance of people-centred digital innovation and keeping patients at the centre. And what I'm going to do in this session, along with my team, who I'll introduce in a minute, is show you some really nice, simple techniques and tools for how we do patient-centred digital innovation. I'm very delighted that came on. I was a little bit concerned it wasn't for a minute. So this is me. I'll tell you about Habitat in a moment. I never do a slide deck without having my Pets as Therapy dog on there. She's visits our local hospital with me, and she's our secret weapon when we run our co-design workshops, not because she bites people, but because she's very cute and relaxing, and she makes events all the more fun. Sadly, didn't bring her today. So Habitat, we're hosted by an NHS trust in Leeds, and we focus on people-centred digital innovation, bringing together the best of the NHS. I've worked in the NHS for a long time, well over 20 years, and I'm a social worker by training, but got really interested in digital technologies, and so set up Habitat to bring the best of the NHS and public sector together with the best of digital innovation and software development. Okay. So that's me, that's our purpose. So digital technologies for social good that solve real-world problems and are co-designed. And very briefly, we do a lot of early-stage discovery where we help test and validate ideas. We incubate, we run programs, we develop stuff ourselves, we bring developers in to work for us. We help with adoption of digital technologies in practice, and we also do sort of digital strategy, but always with collaboration, patient and practitioner focus at the centre. So that's us. And I'd like to introduce Patrick and Robbie, who are over at the back, who run Us Creates. And Patrick, do you want to just briefly say what Us Creates do?
Us Creates are a design agency specialising in service design and prevention programme design. Been working in the health and wellbeing sector for about 15 years, but over the last 4 or 5 years, we've moved more into digital transformation and digital design projects. So we've worked with NHS England on National Patient Online, digital maturity, working on the London Sexual Health Transformation Programme, and with Maudsley, South London and Maudsley around their Wheel of Wellbeing website and app. And I think kind of the principles we use, and it's really interesting, Jonathan, the first speaker, talking about behaviour change, and about how you use your insight into your patients and or your clinicians in terms of melding that with behaviour change theories to help design and implement the apps and digital health projects you're working on. Tying that in with how digital programs and digital apps and digital health fit in with existing service pathways and programs and actually in work environments is key, and that participatory design, again, with patients, with clinicians, with users. So they've got to use it. They've got to learn how to use what you're developing and what you're using.
Thank you very much. So that's Patrick and Robbie. Do you want to wave as well? And Nina, who is an associate of Habitat, waving, will be helping facilitate. So, okay. So on to the actual work. So we always start, and no doubt Us Creates do too, with a hypothesis, a challenge, a question, an idea, something that we've been chewing over where we think digital technology might have a role today. And Yinka and her colleagues challenged each of the 4 STPs to do exactly that same thing. So we have 4 sets of tables. So Yinka, we've sort of got, how are we doing? Got 4 here. Northwest London here. Northeast around here. So southeast and southwest. And I know there's a nominated person to very, very briefly, in a sentence if you can do it, to describe each of the challenges, just so the whole room has a sense of them. So if those people know who they are, could they stand up for me, please? Now, would you mind just quickly coming to the front just to make it a little bit easier for people to hear? So the first one I've got is navigation and communication. So who's that? Would one person like to speak to this one? So this is about older people and their carers accessing a wide range of services and support?
Yep, that's me.
That's you. Aha, good. Okay. Cool. So very briefly.
Okay, in North West London, we've got a population of over 2 million people, 13% of which are over 65. We have 4 acute trusts, 5 intermediate care providers, 8 local authorities, 8 CCGs, 400 GPs, and actually thousands of voluntary sector providers, all of whom provide care to older people. But it's really difficult for all those older people to actually access this huge plethora of what's out there. The question for us today is there a way, a digital solution to help older people, their carers, and health and social care professionals navigate this huge wealth of resource that's out there and find the right capacity at the right time for the right person?
Brilliant, very succinctly put. Thank you very much. So that one's about navigation. So the next one is self-management for people at risk of a heart attack. Someone's got to own this one. If not, I will say...
Oh, is this me?
Ah.
Well, apologise for that. I now know what I'm looking at. For heart attacks, please read stroke. So I'm from East London. We've got a population that is very heterogeneous, very poor, with many, many risk factors for stroke. We're concerned that within the hospital sector, we can't get enough engagement with the population at large to either self-identify or present new ways of identifying those patients at risk and starting preventive programs, anticoagulation if they're in atrial fibrillation, better management of hypertension, and so on. This is on the background of a digital solution that I think we'd like to share with you. We've had something called the East London Patient Record for a couple of years. That provides all practitioners in East London access to the GP record if you're working within the hospital, or the hospital record if you're working in primary care and in the community. And on the back of that, we're building a population health tool that'll take data from all of those sources and re-provide it to either researchers, clinical practitioners, or patients themselves. And what we'd like from you, I think, is views of how we could actually engage the population to understand the possibilities of that solution.
Fabulous, thank you very much. Okay, so urgent e-referral. It's because I've given them a title, you see, it's confusing people. Okay?
So I think in South East London, which is where I'm from, we're kind of grappling with a couple of problems, and what we haven't done actually is think about how we could address that or solve it digitally. So we've kind of set ourselves a challenge that we would investigate what type of hot clinics we have across South East London Trust, whether that's actually in secondary care or in the community, and how you access those hot clinics. So we know we've got a multitude of ambulatory care pathways. They differ CCG or borough by borough. We know we've got differences in sort of telephone or online advice for our GPs. Some have it, some don't, and they all potentially use different systems. What we also know is that we don't know how well those systems are utilised, and what we'd like to try and kind of work out a bit better is there a way that we could make it systematic across South East London to access advice, triage, refer on through a type of directory of service so that it's really easy for locum GPs or GPs that just have so many pathways to navigate, so that you can direct a patient away from A&E and to a different area to manage a long-term condition when a patient's in an acute exacerbation. It's obviously for sort of non-life-threatening issues, but trying to avoid the kind of predictable route of a fast outpatient appointment or going to A&E with a GP letter. We're looking to see if there's some kind of tool that could support with that.
Fabulous, thank you very much. And last but not least, this is about mother and clinician digital record.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm representing South West London sector, and one of the issues that we all face, irrespective of where we are, is how do we look after pregnant women with them carrying their own maternity record. I'm a practicing obstetrician gynecologist. I've been delivering babies for over 20 years, and in that time frame, mothers have always carried their own records, and that is good. Because it gives them a degree of responsibility, it makes them feel that it's their pregnancy, and they carry their record with them. But there are lots of occasions when they don't have their record. So I've lost count of a number of times when I see women who come to see me in clinic, they've left their notes on the bus, the dog's eaten the record, someone else has taken it. And so it presents particular challenges because I have no idea. I don't necessarily have all the information I need from an electronic record. Some trusts don't have an electronic patient record. And so we need to move towards a situation where we can have real-time access to information. It applies not just in obstetrics and maternity, but equally to many other specialties. Women are seen in many settings, both in primary care, secondary care, in children's centres, and we need to record that information, but it is challenging. Women are admitted as emergencies all over the country. They may book at my hospital, but they're on holiday, they're in the West Country. They pitch up in a hospital with an acute problem. No one knows anything about it. So from a patient safety point of view, it is truly time that we move to a different solution. It's particularly pertinent in respect of the first speaker about patients being the centre, patients carrying their own record, patients being responsible for their care. And maternity certainly is a prime example of where we need to think about women owning their record, being essentially at the centre of their care and making decisions about how they want to be cared for. And certainly it's a very good example of how we can take things forward with regard to this topic.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got really 4 very sort of sticky issues and problems that people want to work on, and in a few minutes you're going to have an opportunity in tables to help contribute to that thinking. If you're not sat on the table that's relevant to your STP, don't worry about it, because this is all about sharing, learning between yourselves, and actually it might be really good to have someone with a different perspective from outside the STP patch to contribute. So before we go into the exercises, I just want to share my version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is my digital hierarchy of needs, because it's really tempting, and we've fallen into this trap ourselves, to start at the top of the pyramid, which is self-actualization, isn't it, in Maslow's terms, but in terms of digital tools and technologies, but not always pay attention to all the foundations that need to be in place. So we've made the mistake in the past of starting at the top, getting completely thrown by the foundations not being in place and a project completely falling apart. So it's so important to think about infrastructure, whether that be public Wi-Fi, whether it be devices, whether that be interoperability, permissive policies, but really think when you're in your tables, just have a mind's eye to not just a digital tool, but what sort of infrastructure might we need in place? What are the demographics of the patients that we're working with, and how digitally included or excluded are they? And then what are the digital skills and confidence of our workforce, and what do we need to think about in that regard, as well as thinking about tools and technologies. And those little images there are sort of representing sort of behaviours, culture, leadership, all those sort of soft things that are absolutely pivotal to digital technologies working in practice as an enabler of improved patient outcomes and patient experience. So I'd just like you to hold that in mind, if you will. So, don't do it yet, but in a moment, I want one of you to reach under your table and you will have a pack. And in that pack is a set of personas. And a persona is an imaginary person. And we want you to really play true to what Jonathan set out in his first introductory talk, which is we've all introduced the problems and the challenges from a system, organisational, practitioner perspective. Let's sort of hold that and now go into thinking about what this means for an imaginary person who actually might use the services that we've had described. So I want you to get into teams of 4, maximum 4, so around 2 per table. pull out a persona and just start completing the template and creating a composite from all your knowledge of patients that you work with. And then I will, when we finish the exercise in about 10 minutes, I'll then share with you why I think this is a really powerful and engaging tool. Not a tool to use instead of engaging and involving patients, but actually a tool to use with patients. So I'm going to hand over to you, and our little team will wander around and check you're okay, but it'll be about 10 minutes, then I'm going to call you back, and we're going to have a little reflect and then do another exercise. And the reason why we find personas really, really powerful when we're working with patients, citizens, and with practitioners is that it really helps people get out of their own situation and their own concerns and step into the shoes of somebody else. It also, where it's a topic or where it's a condition where there may be some stigma or shame, it means that people can talk about their own experience but in a sort of a third-party way. So it just creates a little bit of distance for people. And also, it stops people getting stuck in their own position, and you end up with a composite. So it's a negotiated composite of any number of different experiences around a table. So we don't do personas about people, we do them with people, but they create a safe and quite a creative way for people to really step into the shoes of what it might be like to experience a particular condition or to be engaged with a particular service. So I know you only had the slightest of exposure to that, and we would normally take at least an hour just doing that piece of work. But I'm going to move you very swiftly on to have another little play with another really simple tool, which is a storyboarding tool. Now, we know, don't we, that stories are the things we always remember out of everything, and stories can be a great way of getting you engaged in what life might be like for somebody or how things might be in the future. So you've got some storyboard templates on your table, and what we want you to do ever so quickly again, and you may not get through it and no one's going to check your work and test you, so this is just about having a little play. We'd like you to think about your persona with the STP sort of challenge in the back of your mind, and tell a story that exemplifies what life is like for your persona at the moment. So this persona here is actually a social worker, and they told a story of just a very simple everyday thing that happens in their work that is very annoying to them because they don't have a smart device, for example. But I would like you to tell a very small story in pictures and maybe a few words that exemplifies life for your persona at the moment. And you have about 4 minutes to do it, so you're really going to have to apply yourselves. I've been very impressed by the stick people drawing creativity around the tables, for those of you that have attempted them. Okay, so storyboards can just be another tool to really engage you in what is life like for that persona. Tell a story, step into someone else's shoes, think about what life is like for them. I think it's also really important, and we're not going to do this today, but it is important to stick with a problem or a challenge for as long as possible so that you really engage with it and you really understand it from as many different perspectives as possible. And often, practitioners and people from a service will come to us and tell us the problem or the challenge they want to solve. But when we do the co-design workshops, it turns out that for patients and citizens, sometimes it's a very different problem. So it's really important to stick with that problem and to interrogate it and to endeavour to understand it, because if you don't, of course, you might end up creating completely the wrong solution. Okay, so the last exercise, well, almost penultimate exercise I'd like you to do is using either the back or another storyboard template. Now describe what life is like. So retell that same story, but retell it in the future when all the challenges associated with this STP question have been resolved. Your patient is in a fabulous position and life is going swimmingly. Let's engage with that future vision of what life is going to be like for your patient in terms of their health, in terms of their outcomes, in terms of their experience of day-to-day life, okay? So you've got another sort of 5 minutes to do that. Okay, please don't make me do that awful noise again. Could you all, yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, so again, a very quick, just little taster, but hopefully that's given you an opportunity to think about not just how tough things might be now for your persona, but also how things might be in the future should you come up with some fantastic digital innovations or find other ways to address some of those problems and challenges. Before I move us on to the final exercise, if anyone's left a yellow North Face bag outside, could they either put their hands up or make their way to the back to reclaim it, because they might be causing a bit of a security incident. So we won't look, but yes, thank you. Okay, all right, we're all looking. So for the last 5 minutes, I'd like you to just sort of round up this exercise by thinking about your persona, where they are now in terms of their story, and where you would love them to be in the future in terms of their story. What are the 1, 2, or 3 sort of killer things that are going to really make a difference in terms of getting them there? And really that's the output to take away from this session. So you might want to write it on a post-it note and keep it if it's useful to you. But yeah, just start thinking about if there was one thing we could do to get us from A to B, what would that one thing be? And just to start sort of thinking about, action planning, okay? So back over to you for the last few minutes. Okay, thank you very much. I mean, that was a pretty pacey session, so I hope you found some of the conversations useful. And if nothing else, it's got you talking and thinking and being active participants in the day. We're not going to do death by feedback, but if you would like to share any insights, I think it would be really valuable for other people to be able to see them. So could you put them onto Slido, please, and then other people can have sight of them. Okay. So just to finish off, these might be tools that you're familiar with, or they might be very new to you, and we've just introduced you to some very simple ones. But what we found at Habitat is that actually being playful in the approaches you take to engage and involve patients and practitioners can actually be a really good way of stimulating people's thinking. So rather than talking about something, actually creating something, building, doing at the same time as talking is not only a really powerful way of engaging the imagination, but also it's a great leveler. And it keeps us really engaged in people's lives and less on systems and structures. The other thing that we found really powerful and really important is that if you do this co-design and participatory work right at the beginning of a process, you take people with you because they feel like they own it and they've been part of the conversation the whole way through. So somebody asked, there was an anonymous ask there about how do we involve patients. And there's something about orientation and about, how the values-based thing about we have to do this. The other, I think, is about stubbornness, actually. When we started out, we allowed ourselves to, for services to say, it's too hard to get patients, can we just do it with the staff? They always regretted it about half an hour, and they were like, damn, we should have had some patients with us. So I just think it's really, really, it's not just important, but you won't build good digital stuff if you don't involve people. The last thing to say is that bringing that blend of tools that we'll be more familiar with in the NHS, such as service improvement tools, appreciative inquiry, behaviour change theory, and mixing it up with good use of data, service design thinking, agile software development, can just be a really, really powerful mix. And I think bringing domain experts with technology experts and service design experts is good magical things can happen, and I would really encourage you to start thinking about using these sorts of tools, not just actually in a digital context, but in any sort of redesign, innovation work that you're doing. My last comment is an instruction via Yinka, which is, one of you, please, can you put everything back into the pack and put it under your table so it's all nice and neat. Thank you very much, and to Patrick and Robbie and Nina for supporting me in this exercise. Hope you've enjoyed it and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.